Greetings and welcome, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, to some more fashionably light impressions here at Words About Games. Amy here, and today I'm going to talk to you all about Loot River. First of all, I want to give out some general information about the game. Loot River is an isometric roguelike developed by Straka Studio and published by Straka Studio and Superhot Presents, and was released on May 3rd, 2022 on PC via Steam and on Xbox One, Xbox Series S, and Series X, and is also currently available in Game Pass. According to the game's store description, explore procedurally generated labyrinths in a dungeon-crawling action roguelike that combines tense real-time combat with spatial block shifting, slide blocks of ancient ruins, fight bestial abominations, loot, explore, level up, strategize, cast powerful spells, die, and wake up anew. Loot River is a pretty unique mashup of different genres and intriguing gameplay ideas. If you've heard me talk about it on the podcast, you might remember me calling it Dark Souls, but also Tetris once or twice. And, I mean, who wouldn't be excited for that? I was. And I really wanted to love it just for being a fairly unique game. But unfortunately, after playing the game for a few hours, I feel worn out by it. It's got a few things that it does really well, but also for me personally, one really glaring problem. It was originally two really glaring problems. I played Loot River for about 5 hours, and after my first session with the game, which was about 2 hours, I was ready to rage against the combat. It's really hard to get into the rhythm of the core gameplay at first. Ostensibly, Loot River is an isometric roguelike action RPG. Its core combat is very evocative of Dark Souls, albeit from a very different perspective, thanks to how deliberate it is. Button mashing will not carry you very far in this game. You need to become familiar with the attack pattern of the weapon you're using, your dodge and parry timings. Loot River has an incredibly satisfying parry mechanic tied to a specific button. And you also need to learn your enemies and when to press the attack, back off, dodge, parry, etc. Due to a combination of the art style and camera placement, it can be difficult to read, which can mean you'll mess up a lot in the beginning for what feels like unfair reasons. If you stick with the game, you'll get the hang of it and approach combat with a methodical approach reserved for games that are taking inspiration from Software games, or are actually From Software games. By my final hour with the game, the one I used solely to capture the footage I forgot to capture beforehand, thanks past Amy, I could string together entire combat encounters where I felt adept at fighting. I'd even go so far as to say I occasionally felt like I was good at the game. If you're watching this video, I guess you can be the judge of that. There are still issues. The art style, which I do think looks really, really cool, causes some issues when combined with how far the camera is zoomed out from the action, and the need to pay very close attention to your character's animations as well as your enemies. Once you push the button to make an attack, you're committed to that attack. If an enemy swings for you during an attack, too bad, you're going to take some damage. I never really felt wholly comfortable figuring out when my attack animation was over and I could dodge or parry, which made it feel like I was being hit unfairly. Sometimes it looked as though I'd done enough to move out of the way of an enemy attack only to take damage anyway. Sometimes it looked like my weapon literally passed through an enemy instead of hitting them. And sometimes it felt like enemy attacks simply came out of nowhere, and that's even with Loot River flashing a symbol above an enemy's head when they're about to unleash hell. All of this added up to combat mechanics that I never felt comfortable with. I eventually got to a point where I felt like I could do the combat, but this was definitely in spite of the issues I just mentioned. And that's without me even talking about how inconsistent dodging feels. Sometimes when I dodged, I'd smash through scenery, other times I got stuck on it and take a greatsword to the face. Sometimes I felt like I could dodge around or through an enemy, other times it felt like it wouldn't work and I just got stuck on them. I've used the word sometimes a lot in describing Loot River's combat, and that's because if I had to describe it in a single word, it would be inconsistent. Sometimes something works and sometimes it doesn't, which makes combat feel a bit unfair. Not as unfair as the game's progression feels, my true sticking point with the game and the thing that's driven me from wanting to keep playing it. If I was going to sum that up, I'd probably call it mean-spirited, and that's being charitable. Progression is just glacially slow. It works similarly to a game like Dead Cells, with one critical difference. So between each level, you'll return to the Sanctuary and you're able to interact with several NPCs, some of whom will sell you permanent upgrades, weapons, or spells to help you have a slightly easier time. You do this by accumulating knowledge, which you spend on whatever you want to unlock. When you die, you lose all your knowledge. And if you get to the Sanctuary and can't afford an upgrade, you can't buy it, naturally, But you also can't invest your knowledge in anything, just hoard it and hope you don't die before being able to afford to buy something. Knowledge is pretty rare during the first level, and there's a noticeable difficulty spike in the second. Basically, in the 5 hours I played Loot River, I managed to buy one single upgrade. Permanent progression is the thing that blunts the repetition inherent with roguelikes, and Loot River barely has any progression, unless you're a god tier gamer, I guess. Essentially, I was stuck going around in circles making no progress. I kept hitting the sanctuary between the first and second level with nowhere near enough knowledge to buy anything, then die in the second level with absolutely nothing to show for the effort. It genuinely felt like the game was telling me to go fuck myself. I eventually managed to buy a new weapon to add to the pool of potential pickups, and as I contemplated putting another potential 5 hours into unlocking one more new thing, I decided I could have more fun doing just about anything else. Elsewhere, there are a lot of cool ideas and features in Loot River. The Tetris-like platforms that you move around on are inspired. There are unique means of traversing a dungeon. They can set up some interesting environmental puzzles to solve. We need to figure out how to arrange the platforms to let you explore off the beaten path, as much as there is a beaten path on the river, I guess. And they can also be used tactically in combat. Moving the platforms to split big groups of enemies and make them more manageable, or powering up a heavy attack while you're out of reach before sliding your platform into position and getting a big hit for essentially free. Outside of the way permanent progression works, there are some other interesting ideas at play. Artifacts you can find can be activated in later runs that can help you modify the dungeon or enemies or adapt things to better suit your playstyle. One such artifact, for example, can stop a certain enemy emitting a poison cloud whenever they're damaged, but will ensure that all of their attacks are poisonous. Character leveling is interesting too. Each new run starts you at level 1, and you gain XP on runs to spend on stat increases, allowing you to tailor your stats to the weapons or spells you find in the dungeon, augmented by rings that can grant abilities such as healing on successful parries or straight booster stats. Loot River is a game I wanted to love. It's got some really interesting and unique ideas, especially the Tetris-like platforms you use to traverse the dungeon, and the combat can be quite thrilling, if a bit inconsistent. But the stinginess of the permanent progression was a deal breaker for me. The fact that it takes so long to unlock a single new weapon just feels mean, and made me feel like I was wasting my time with the game more than having an actually good time. Well, that's it for this review. Let us know what you think of the game. Did you like it? Are you in the middle? Or was it just not for you? Leave a comment down below or hit me up on Twitter. All the info is in the description, and I'm going to get out of here because I have tons more games to play and there's not enough time in the day. So I will see you next time.